É com muito orgulho que eu queria chamar aqui no palco um dos cofundadores da VTEX, Alexandre Soncini. Por favor, Soncini.
Olá, bom dia, tudo bom? Como o Patrick falou, eu sou Alexandre Soncini, um dos cofundadores da VTEX. Eu vou começar aqui a introdução em português, mas o Ravi eu já faço o switch para o inglês. Acho que a tradução simultânea é canal 5 e canal 4, aí vocês se acham aí. Mas a ideia é falar um pouco de inovação no varejo. Então I'm gonna switch to English to make sure that Ravi understand. So good morning again, everybody. I'm Alex Soncini, one of the co-founders of VTEX. And we're going to talk a little bit about this digital transformation that is happening in the market. So I have only one slide to show and to talk about the evolution of the software waves. So we've seen in the past the on-premises as the main solution, going to the software as a service, then headless to decomposable. So we will start talking about composability as well as innovation with Ravi. And again, this was just to give you some context. So Ravi, please, welcome to the arena stage. Thank you. Let's sit down. Good. Is your mic working? Can you turn on the mic? Não. Vocês podem ligar o mic aí, Patrick? Patrick, ligar o mic do Ravi. Não tá funcionando. Manter. The guys.
Okay, I think we're back.
Good. So now, Ravi, if you can introduce yourself quickly and talk a little bit about AWS and what you guys doing in Brazil before we start talking about innovation in retail, it would be great.
Sure. So first of all, thanks for having us, Alex. What an exciting turnout today. So my name is Ravi Bagal. I'm the General Manager of Retail and Consumer Products at AWS. Basically, that means two things. I have responsibility for AWS's strategy in retail and consumer products, and I also have a go-to-market team that partners with companies like VTEX.
Great, Ravi. Again, it's great to have you with us. And talking a little bit about innovation, I know that at the NRF in 2023, this year in January, there was a hot discussion about the new customer and how connected this customer is. How retailers are working to understand their customers, to build loyalty, and to keep up these preferences that are changing from the customer itself?
Yeah, I think that, Alex, you and I have known each other, 6, 7 years? And we've been talking about this for a long time. The modern consumer is so connected. She has more power in her hand with a mobile device than most retailers have in their data centers. She's demanding and she's busy, and she needs retailers to be present and serving them. This is the, I think, dominant challenge for retailers. How can they meet the expectation of consumers in digital channels and be with her on her journey through her day?
Perfect. And so in that matter, do you see that the retailers, they need to be in all the channels and make sure that they improve the experience in all those channels to differentiate themselves from the other retailers? So how they can work on the competition and how they can see this new customer evolution and take advantage of it?
Yeah, you know, consumers don't think of channels. They just think of what their daily mission is. You know, Alex, when you go to decide to buy a shirt, you're not one Alex online and a different Alex in the store and a third Alex on social. You're the same Alex. But because of the way technology evolved over time, retailers were forced to think of you as three different people and treat you differently online. Sometimes we don't even know your preferences online, even though you've been a loyal customer in the store. Or maybe when you're physically in the store, we don't have a sense of how you got there, which is usually through a digital channel. So one of the most important challenges we face as a technology company, both AWS and VTEX, how do we give retailers the tools and capabilities to connect that experience for the customer? Because she's the same person and we should treat her that way.
And based on your experience working with retailers, why do you think there's this issue of not considering the same customer in the different channels? Is it a technology issue from legacy systems? Why it's happening?
Yeah, it's a great question. Technology is the problem today, but the heritage is in the evolution of multi-channel retail. In our parents' generation, retail was very dominated by the physical store, right? When e-commerce first came out a quarter of a century ago, it was always treated as a second channel. And we built technology systems and even organized operations in order to support them, almost like two different businesses. And that legacy stays with us today. Most retailers are moving their operations to more of a unified notion. You don't find retailers with merchants for online versus merchants for the store. They just have an apparel merchant or a hardlines merchant. But our systems are forcing us down that road. Our legacy systems that are siloed and on premises. You know, Alex, AWS did some research a couple of years ago, and we discovered that the average retailer has 13 different systems in which customer data lives. 13. And it's because of this on-premise, siloed, legacy infrastructure. Everyone knows it's a problem, but until we can start moving to a modern view of retail technology, for example, the one that VTEX has adopted, we're always going to be handcuffed by decisions that were made in our parents' generation.
That's great, and even though it's not in our script, I'm gonna ask you on that matter. The systems, the legacy systems, they are how they are today because the organization was built in a different structure. And that's why we had someone that was taking care of the offline, someone that was taking care of the online, and like choosing different channels, etc. So how do you see the digital transformation happening? Because it needs to start from the inside, right? The adoption of the right technologies and connecting and unifying those right technologies depend on the organization being towards this unification, right? So how do you see the retailers today, like that are passing through this digital transformation? What are the issues, challenges, benefits? How do you see? Can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, it has to start with business culture. It has to start with the vision that our customers want us to unify the experience. Our customers insist that we be a good fellow traveler on their daily journey. And so when leadership in a retail organization recognizes, in order to serve the customer this way, the technology has to follow the customer. The customer shouldn't have to follow the technology. it's only when you come to this sort of leadership vision of our customers insist upon this, that technology would follow. You know, in AWS and Amazon, we always talk about working backwards from the customer. Right from the beginning of Amazon, in meetings, we would sometimes have an empty chair to represent the customer and always ask, what does the customer want? We find many retailers have adopted this practice, Alex, of always asking, what does the end consumer need? Not what do we think is right, but what do they care about? And when you start working backwards from a customer experience, rather than from, you know, what we've done historically, you realize that these decisions about moving to modern technology and architecture are ultimately in support of a business decision. They're not being done for technology or for elegant architecture, but because it's the only way we can get to serve the customer the way they want to be served.
Great. So what I understood from you is the company should be organized to serve the customer and eventually in experiences, and not according to each department of the company, how they are today. So how they can focus on the customer, how they can hear the customer. And also, I think Amazon AWS itself, they are very customer-centric, right? And I think this customer centricity is what makes the difference towards unifying the systems and making sure that you're offering something that is resonating with the customer at the end of the day and differentiate yourself from the competition, right?
Totally. So. And you know, when we think about what that means from a technology standpoint, it can be a little scary for some customers, for some retailers rather, because it looks like we have to rip and replace everything. The good news is with modern architecture, there are migration paths that can be graceful, that can be less risky, that allow you to move to digital transformation as compared to flipping a light switch on and off. Both VTEX and AWS have always believed in the practical requirements of retailers and how do we make sure we keep the business running as we move in this direction.
Great. And another question that was not on the script, but you talked about migration and the pain of migrating, because I think at least probably AWS has the same situation. Most of our clients, they are coming from another solution to VTEX. But most of them, they only start to like shop around and to look at other options in the market when the perception of how painful is going to be the migration is going to be below the pain that they are suffering today to manage the systems that they have. So the pain of managing the systems that they have today needs to like go above this perception of migration because everybody thinks that a migration is super painful.
Yeah.
So how do we make, and again, it's not an easy process, we all know, but sometimes like everything to get better need to get worse first, right? So how do you see that in AWS as well?
You know, it's funny, Alex. I think that when you get really familiar with difficulty or a pain point, it just becomes normal. We just sort of have gotten used to putting up with the kind of terrible systems that we inherited and doing workarounds and keeping the lights on. So the new thing is always the scary thing. One of the things we always do when we talk to customers is if you look at this coldly, rationally, non-emotionally, and don't talk so much at first about the difficulty of migration, but ask yourself the difficulty of living like you do today, with what you have today, and what does that actually do? We did a survey of over 200 IT leaders in retail a couple of years ago, and 85% of them said legacy systems were the #1 reason they couldn't innovate on behalf of their customers. So a decision to stay with the old way is almost letting the future happen to you rather than engaging the future and driving it forward.
Amazing. And talking about innovation, we have been listening a lot about AI, deep learning, all these new things. So what are the most promising technologies that you see that are going to impact retailers and how they can innovate on that. What's next for retail on that matter?
So I think that we can, the two dominant themes I see, Alex, when we talk to global retailers, and to put this in context, my team engages with about 2,500 enterprise retailers, so globally on 6 continents. Consistently, we hear two things that are the emerging technologies that matter the most. The first is AI, machine learning, and ultimately generative AI. And the second is composability. So maybe we can talk about these in that order. We have been at Amazon using AI and machine learning for about 15 years. And we moved specifically to something called deep learning about 5 or 6 years ago, and have had remarkable improvements in operations. In some cases, our forecasting is 15 times better, if you can imagine that. So we're firm believers in traditional machine learning, and we also think that it's important that companies like VTEX and AWS create tools that allow normal IT professionals to develop these kind of skills, or even business users. Because Alex, they're not making enough data scientists anymore. It's really hard to find them. So finding platforms that embed really strong intelligence, that's what our customers are looking for, not just to be sort of pointed at some academic white paper, but practical business-centric applications. Which leads me to the generative AI question. There's so much buzz on generative AI today, OpenAI, ChatGPT, and so forth. We think ultimately at AWS, it's important to realize, as in all things, that the business should lead the technology, not the technology leading the business. What are we trying to achieve with this technology? And so we're spending a lot of time thinking about practical business applications of generative AI. Things like, can we improve the customer experience on contact centers or chatbots? Can we improve the quality of product information? So practical ways to use it. But it's very early days, isn't it? And I think the best thing to do is to just start experimenting and also talk to your technology platform partners about what you need. Because we listen and we want to hear what you think is really most valuable.
That's great. And again, I think everybody's talking about AI. Everybody asks if AI is just a hype, if it's something that's going to stay in the long term. I think, again, AI has been something that we have for the past maybe 30, 40 years. With the increase in compute capacity and deep learning and different models that have been evolving very fast, it's becoming super powerful. But yet, we need to see what's going to happen in the near future to define how retailers are going to be really leveraging this new technology and implementing that in their ecosystem to make sure that they can, again, serve the customer better and differentiate from the competition, right? So in that sense, I think 2023 and 2024 are going to be very challenging with all the crises that we have. I have been talking with people in the market and they say that it's basically not just starting, but it can get worse. So we see the US maybe entering a recession in the second semester of 2023. Retailers are all kind of very skeptic in what's going to happen in the future. So how can retailers today think about innovation, because they are trying to go back to basics to be more profitable eventually, to increase revenue? And also, what are the lessons learned by Amazon and AWS in this 25 years of experience that you guys have?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm always a believer in never letting a good crisis go to waste. Actually, challenging economic times can be the perfect opportunity to give yourself a chance to experiment. And I think that's the key word, Alex. The way to innovate is to experiment. We have an equation at Amazon that goes like this. Innovation equals experimentation, and experimentation equals failure. Because if there's no chance of a failure, then it's not really an experiment. The problem is traditional retail systems make it really hard to experiment. You have to make a decision and roll out to production and make hope you got it right. And so it's a chilling effect on innovation. But with the modern architectures and approaches that we're bringing to the market, AWS, VTEX, and our partners, you are actually getting to the point where you can build small, executable experiments in the cloud with no on-prem. So they're lightweight. You can see what kind of reaction it has, and if it's positive, you can take it wide, or if it's not, you can just make it go away. That sort of scalability and flexibility of our platforms are the path to innovation and the way out of this sort of prison that traditional systems have put us in. So experimentation is the key, but in order to experiment, you need to have platforms that liberate you to have that freedom to try new things.
So what I'm hearing from you in a different way is this test and trial economy that is going to thrive in the future, because we need to allow the retailers with no capex and maybe very little opex to make sure that they can test and try different things, and with data they can take their decisions. So they do not spend months scoping, then they need to go for the process of developing, testing, deploying, etc. They need to quickly be able to test and try different stuff, do A/B tests, etc., in order to make sure that they have the data that they need to take their decisions on what's working, what's not working.
Yeah.
And by that matter, we talk a lot about composable, the idea of being able to compose your solution with different technologies to enable this agility, to enable the capability of being able to test and try very fast. If it's not working, just take it out. If it is working, continue to push and eventually improving that, right?
Right. So first of all, the good news is the culture of testing and experimenting has always been in retail, right? It's just not been in retail technology. Retailers, when they're thinking about a product line, will do A/B testing to see, does this style or variety or color work? So A/B testing from a merchant standpoint is deeply embedded in the DNA of retailers. We just haven't done it in retail technology as much, which means we haven't done it in retail experience enough. But to your point about composability and how does that help us? I think for those of you who are unfamiliar with the notion of composability, it's the idea that retail technology and systems need to be more agile and flexible, so you can actually put different technologies together very easily to create an experience. Now, the key thing about this, though, is that's a business decision. It's ultimately not about you have a bunch of technology parts that plug together. It's not about having a Lego set. It's about having a business culture of trial and experimentation, of agility and fluidity, and maybe most important, Alex, of being able to detect your customers' changing expectations and being able to adjust to those changes in very fast manners, so you're always delighting the customer. That's what composability is really about.
And that's a good topic. Like what I heard is composability is more how do you eventually connect IT with business?
Yeah.
To make 1 + 1 becoming 3 eventually. But if we see that as a business platform, and again, the world is becoming more and more technological, how business teams are getting more tech, and eventually tech people are getting more business. How do you see this movement coming? Because today we need technology, we need a background of technology. We cannot depend only on IT and vice versa. IT needs to become more strategic for the company as well to make sure that composability works. So how do you see that blend between IT and business?
Yeah, I think that the IT and business worlds are converging, and we need to accelerate that convergence. From an IT standpoint, you might think of it as being the consumerization of IT. How do we increasingly make platforms usable by business leaders, not always relying on IT, but user interfaces and ways of using technology that a marketer or a merchant can use directly? and not always rely on an engineer. By the same standard, a lot of technologists are becoming more and more business savvy and focused. You can see organizations in the world where the chief digital officer and chief marketing officer, and often even the chief technology officer might be in the same org. In many cases, Alex, it's the same person. So the convergence of our digital platforms to be more friendly to business users, and also the sort of upskilling of our technology teams to become more business-centric. Ultimately, though, all of these parties have to be in the room together as they're making these decisions.
And that said, we see a evolution of the IT area that maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago was an internal vendor of the other areas that were clients to help with the computers, the network or whatever, becoming much more strategic. So coming to the front of the business and working with business people to make sure that all this test and trial economy is doable.
Right.
Because again, even though we are talking about giving agility and facilitating the business with that, we still need some knowledge on technology to make it happen. Again, we are going to see Copilot, Autopilot, or whatever coming with AI, so technology is going to be probably easier to maneuver with all this artificial intelligence that is coming, but we are not yet there.
No.
And so even with that, business people need to become more tech, and tech people need to become more business for that to converge to something that will be the new future of retail, right?
Yeah, I think VTEX and AWS have always shared that vision of making technology very familiar and available to the business user. In upskilling technical teams, we have a shared commitment to education, for example, and to training, not just from a technical standpoint, but also how do you organize for a modern business-centric technology organization. Many people have heard the Amazon notion of a two-pizza team. For those of you who don't know, we believe in small teams that if you need more than two pizzas to feed it, the team's too large. But what sometimes we don't talk about is we always try to find cross-functional teams, business, technology, operations together, so that we're not sort of in silos, sort of coming up with an idea and then throwing it over the wall, but together co-innovating.
Perfect. And how do you see on that point, like I see a lot of CIOs and CTOs that are still kind of resisting to take this path. Why? Because I think the IT organizations, they were born and raised where power was a synonym of managing resources, having more headcount. As more headcount as I have, as more power as I have. With this composability approach, usually the IT organization are going to be leaner.
Right.
And by that, most CIOs and CTOs have the feeling that they are losing power with that. But on the other hand, from being an internal vendor, they are coming to the front of the business and being much more strategic. Yeah. So how those CIOs, CTOs, how do you see them evolving in the market with this dilemma? What are the advice, the piece of advices that you have?
Yeah, I mean, between sort of the consumerization of IT and making IT more friendly to business users, but also the AI and generative AI stuff we were talking about a moment ago, the kind of jobs that exist under the CTO or CIO are going to change. So when C-level executives sense that maybe they're losing control, what they really need to think about is, how am I training my teams to be the technology executives and professionals of the future? Because they'll need new skills, more business-centric skills. It's not going to be about the hardcore tech and coding that it was in the past. It's going to be a more fluid combination of business requirements and technical requirements. And our technology folks are also going to have to be more generalists. So for those executives who are visionary, they recognize it's not about losing power, Alex. It's about gaining influence by upskilling their teams and making them a full partner in the future of that business.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think we are running out of time. We have one more minute, so last question here, and maybe open-ended question. How do you see AWS today being able to help retailers to innovate and to move forward, be in the forefront of the innovation and making sure that their business thrives? So how AWS can be included in that scenario?
Well, retail has a special place at AWS because we were born in retail, right? The very existence of AWS is because we had created capacity for peak season, for the holiday season, for Amazon retail. So our DNA is all about retail. And we're continually thinking about how can we take our learnings from 20 years, 25 years of dealing with consumers and bringing that to other retailers. But one of our primary ways to deliver that technology is through our great partners. And so our ability to make VTEX successful and the other partners at this expo is our number one strategy to deliver value for retailers, and we'll continue to be committed to that going forward.
Amazing, amazing. So Ravi, thank you very much for sharing your experience here at VTEX Day. Thank you, it's a pleasure to have you.
It's always great to see you, Alex.